I feel so out of practice. Welcome back. If you've been here before, sorry I've been gone. If you haven't been here before, welcome. Nice to have you. Appreciate having you here. Nice to have you. Appreciate you. Stay. If you hear any sounds, it is my fiance painting our kitchen. Also, you notice the new background. We moved like 3 months ago. Well, a little bit longer than that. But we just moved, and we're moving again in like 6 or 7 months, so get ready for drastic life changes. It's been a while, but it's okay. Life just got too dark for just everybody. I mean, in general. Researching true crime cases just got too dark for me. Break a step back. I didn't do anything true crime related. I really didn't even watch true crime. I stepped back from the whole community, stepped back from the whole everything, because I just couldn't do it anymore. Other stuff came up, and so I always kept saying, well, I'll record another time, I'll do research and I'll record another time, and I just kept pushing it back, and there was no reason for me to come back because, you know what, I was like, it'll always be there, but you know what, it will, but this brings me joy. I started going back to grad school, and one of my classes I had to take was statistics, and we were told at the beginning of the year that we had one big paper to write. All we had to do was we had to pass all the quizzes, pass all the tests, and write one large paper. Which you might ask, how do you write a paper for a statistics class? And I will argue, yeah, it's kind of hard. And the only criteria we had for it was that it had to be something statistics related. After racking my brain for a little bit, you know, it kind of just came to me as like a Jimmy Neutron brain blast of like, true crime. Duh, obviously. So, when I started writing this paper, and we're gonna get to this point. When I started writing this paper, it was just about something statistics related for true crime, and the only really thing that I could come up with was the salvation rate of cold cases, which I have fallen down this massive rabbit hole, and it has given me the desire and the wherewithal to come back here and see what I can do to help, which we'll get to in a little bit. So like I said, I talked about on the Instagram that like things were going to be changing and the channel was going to change a little bit, and it will, because I can't do, as much as I see the value of bringing knowledge to, you know, homicides and how they happen, and the psychology behind serial killers and the psychology behind the people that kill people, right? As much as I can see some of the benefit of that, it makes me feel icky. Now, I don't care if other people do that. I mean, to each their own. If I am just stepping back from that because I don't see, there's no added value to everybody's life, right? Which we'll get to that. But so, as I started researching this is disastrous. And I knew it was going to be bad, but I didn't know it was going to be this bad. Looking at the surface of true crime, it's popular everywhere now. Podcasts, TV channels, documentaries, it's everywhere. It really is everywhere. The true crime phenomena has ended up everywhere. And it's kind of a good thing and kind of a bad thing at the same time, right? It's definitely I've read several articles about like the ethics of the true crime community, and like I see it, whatever. I get it. But we are not talking about the salvation rates of cold cases, right? And after I wrote this paper a couple months ago, and now I'm getting back into like this, I never realized how big of a problem it was. And for someone who, like me, had been very true crime obsessed and had been very into the community, enough to start my own podcast and YouTube channel about it, and I had never realized how bad it was. And it didn't even like occur to me that it was that bad until I started doing this paper, right? When I actually had to graph out the data, and I will show my charts from good sources, from creditable sources. It's astounding. It is absolutely astounding that more people aren't talking about this. And I mean, there are communities, there are websites, I mean, don't get me wrong, those do exist, but like, it had never occurred to me that it was this bad. Okay, so if you are new to the idea of cold cases, or you've heard the word before but you're not sure exactly what it means, so cold case, to put it by the definition, is an unsolved criminal investigation which remains open pending the discovery of new evidence. And this term was coined by people to I guess, show that the case was no longer hot, right? So a hot case, you're getting new leads, you're solving it, it's hot. But if you're not getting new leads, the case will grow cold, and you know, the longer a case is cold, usually the less likelihood you have of solving it is the big issue here. The definition, the actual definition of what makes a cold case cold is super vague, and it's held in a different light by different states. So what I found out was that the state of Arizona defines a cold case is if the case is open for more than 1 year. It's considered to be cold. In Los Angeles, so it's 5 years. So there's no real agreed upon time frame for a case to be considered cold. That was the first thing that I noticed, is that you have an entire nation, and not even counting the rest of the world, that have not agreed upon what a cold case is. It's not important for this. An unsolved crime is an unsolved crime, so it's semantics, literally, but just to let you know that, like, so if you see cold cases mentioned, it's not, there's no defined, this is a cold case. That's the whole point of that. So the figure that I'm going to show you, and I'll probably put it on the screen, it shows the accumulation of cold cases in the United States over a 20-year time span. I feel like this graph is super important to be showed because on a year-to-year basis, it seems like a small problem. In the grand scheme of things, though, this is a massive problem, growing every single year. Annually, the average number of homicides in a year is around 13,700 homicides per year. 13,700 homicides per year, roughly, average. And at this rate, they're being solved at 63.6%, right? So of those almost 14,000 homicides per year, 63% of those are being solved. That just means that the number of unsolved crimes is growing, as you can see on the chart. In 2017, the total number of homicides or non-negligent manslaughter over the 20-year time span was 287,761 homicides. And despite 184,000, almost 185,000 of those homicides were solved, that still left over 103,000 homicide victims and families who never got answers. So 63.6% of homicides being solved is great. It's great. It's fine. But I don't think we're talking about the number of crimes that have not been solved, right? That's the issue here. There's still a lot happening that is not talked about enough, right? So going from there, I did find another set of data that extrapolates these numbers out further, and I actually made my own chart. So this is a chart that I physically created from the data. I have the data. If you'd like to see it, you can DM me. I will send it to you. The data represented the number of homicides committed versus homicides solved from 1965 to 2019. From the data, I was able to create a linear regression to determine if there was any form of trends that could be found. The trend is definitely still evident, though, as you can tell, and my R-squared value isn't horrible. It's also not the best, but there is still a trend. The closure rate of cases is going down. And of course, the chart is a little bit exaggerated. I actually forecasted out 20 more years into the future to kind of get an idea of like where this was going. Because if you do see, we are kind of, I don't want to say leveling out. I don't know if that's like the right word. Towards the end here, we're kind of plateauing a little bit. So I extrapolated out the linear regression just to show where we're going. Now, hopefully I'm wrong. That would be best case scenario, is that I'm actually wrong about this and we plateau and start going up on solving of cold cases. That would be delightful, right? So I'm just presenting this data to you. Full disclosure, it could be wrong. After looking at the case closure rates, I was curious though, do we see a similar trend in homicides to account for that closure rate? Like, is there just an astronomical amount of murders and homicides happening, or is there something that explains the data, right? Like, are more murders being committed so they're not being solved, or like, you know, where does that fall? Why is this the case? And I wanted to see if it could be extrapolated some other way. So if you look at this graph, it's the number of homicides per year up until 2020, because I think this chart, the data that I got was through 2019. And if you look at the number of homicides per year on this chart and the R-square value, the answer seems to be no. I mean, it kind of has a couple of bumps in 1980 and like 1993-ish, as you can see on the chart, but for the most part, it's kind of level. You know, there's no trend. You can't see a trend. It's kind of all over the place. So for there to be such a clear trend with the accumulation of cold cases, and therefore to be such a clear trend in the solvation rate of cold cases, and just cases in general, it doesn't appear to be that this is the cause of that. The number of homicides is not causing the issue, which I think I had originally gone down that rabbit hole to see, like, are our police forces and homicide detectives just so bogged down that they can't keep up, right? And so I just wanted to see if that was the case compared to like 1990 or compared to the 70s. You know, I just wanted to see where we kind of fell on that, and it doesn't appear that that is like the same trend. If you know anything else about that, feel free to enlighten me, but that's what I see. Now you know the background. It is currently estimated, roughly, that there are over 250,000 unsolved murders in the United States at this current moment. Now, like I said, this was written in July of 2021, so it could be different now, but at the time, it was 250,000 unsolved murders. And one would think, and I thought this as well, with new technology and the capabilities of forensic science, in terms of like DNA analysis and proper stale techniques, digital evidence, better training, you know, the idea of a serial killer, the idea of solving homicides has been around for a long time now, and I think there's better training, there's better science, there's better things behind it. So you would think we would be solving cases faster, not slower. So I was curious about that, right? Because the logic behind that would say that if you have better technology and everybody leaves a digital trace, I'm using my cell phone to record this, the government knows exactly where I am, I'm using my phone. If you're on Snapchat, if you send messages, cell towers, if you use your phone or a computer or your GPS on your car, like, people know where you are, you know? In the 1970s, they didn't have that, so serial killers were harder to find. It made sense. But now, you think with everything we have, it doesn't make sense that, like, that these are being solved slower, in my opinion. Now, I could argue that, you know? I could see other sides of that argument as well. So I guess, it just, for the sake of this conversation, that's what my thought process was, right? So I went a little bit further down the rabbit hole. Why? That's what I wanted to know, is why? Because there has to be a reason, right? It's not just some unexplained, like, oh, we don't know. Like, there has to be some type of reason why this is the case. And I wanted to see why. And luckily, because the police are a government agency and there's a lot of data out there about this, I was able to find it. And it's all just publicly listed and on cold case websites. So let's go, right? So in 2016, the Bureau of Justice Statistics determined that although the United States has almost 18,000 law enforcement agencies, only 7%, so 1,260 of those 18,000 law enforcement agencies have a dedicated cold case unit. And was kind of surprising to me, because you think that every police department has a cold case unit, right? Like, I guess that was kind of a shocking statistic that I didn't know that. Not shocking that I didn't know that, but shocking that that's what the number was. And I guess also shocking that, like, I didn't know that. And an even more daunting figure was that 20% of the agencies that have a cold case unit only 20% of them have a process for initiating cold case investigations. So there's not even a process for it. They have a cold case unit and they just look at it sometimes when they feel like looking at cold cases. So there's no process for like doubling back or looking at old cases, or, you know, there's no process for it. Just the cases they look at are random, or maybe, I'm assuming when like somebody calls in a tip, maybe they pull the files and check it again, but there's no cycling through old cases to like see if there's anything else out there, unless I'm assuming the family bothers them or they get a tip. There are so many hot cases that are currently happening that there's just not enough time. If you want homicide detectives to be working on the cases that are happening today, right now, First 48 style, they don't have time to work on cold cases. There's only so many hours in the day, and like if you've ever seen the First 48, which I'm sure you probably have, or if you've ever seen anything about like crime, I mean, they dive in feet first, like trying to figure out, like on the run, time is of the essence, figuring out the clues, because as stated previously, the longer the case goes unsolved, the less likely you are to solve it. But there just simply aren't enough hours in the day for these detectives to pour everything they have. 24-hour shifts. You know, I mean, endless on the clock time trying to solve these crimes. To have them also, oh, you just spent 3 days trying to catch this one guy. Well, I need you to also be spending that same amount of time trying to solve these cold cases that are daunting work. They are. I've started researching for the future of this channel, and it's a lot. There's a lot of pieces, and there's a lot of thought process that you have to try to see where the pieces connect and where that missing bit is. These police officers, I mean, you know, they know the area that they work in, which they have an advantage of. I mean, the cold case I'm currently researching is in Honolulu, and I've never been to Hawaii, so I don't really know the area very much, but I also feel like I'm helping, right? And we'll get into that. But so it's the only thing they really have is like the inside knowledge of the cases and like the locale and whatever they haven't shared with people because it's still an open investigation, right? So they have a little bit of an advantage, but we can help. The more daunting part of that information is, though, even with those 1,260 agencies that have an operating cold case unit, getting a case closed is not a favorable outcome. It's just not. I read an article that Washington, D.C. has a dedicated cold case squad. This squad, which at the time of this article being written, that this paper was written, had only been in commission for 5 years. And in that 5 years, it had closed 160 homicides, and that's roughly 32 cold cases being closed a year if you average it out. I'm sure there was peaks and valleys in that, but 32 a year, roughly. You know, 160 is a very good number. I mean, it's better than 0, but looking at the daunting, that is like looking at a mountain and shoveling one pile of dirt and saying, I've moved part of this mountain. Like, yes, you absolutely have. You've done good work. But like, and it's not knocking homicide detectives, it's not knocking cold case squads, it's not knocking anybody. It's just the fact of the matter that these are our data points. This is what we know, and it's alarming, to say the least. It's alarming. This chart, and it's kind of a lie, it's a little bit of a data overload, so I apologize in advance, but I'll try to walk you through it. It breaks down over time the general cost of solving a cold case. For reference, the number of awards and the amount of funding lines describe a financial program that is offered by the National Institute of Justice, who also made this table, and it does not include the yearly salary of a detective, which I'll get around to in a second. So what I had hoped to gain from this chart was simply, on average, how much money does it cost to solve a cold case? Dollar amounts. Because if you think about anything, everything costs money. Everything has a cost associated with it. So I wanted to know, how much does it cost to solve a cold case? I didn't know, so I have this chart now. The data and a time period specified, the cost of getting one arrest was nearly $40,000. Between all the testing that needed to be done, the hiring of the labs, just everything involved with it, $40,000 to arrest one person. Which, and my professor and I argued on this because it was the only negative thing he had to say about my paper, was that the internet says the average salary of a detective in the United States, so across the entire thing, is about $40,000, which is the cost of solving one cold case. What one can determine from all this information is that it's not a matter of technology. It's not. The arrest of Joseph James DeAngelo led to 13 homicides being solved that were cold forever. When it comes down to cold cases, right, it's obviously we lack in resources. It's just obvious. It's a daunting task because we don't have the resources for it, right? And luckily, there are people out there who want to help. If you look at, I've gotten really into Uncovered. Uncovered is very similar, where they look at all the cold cases, and it's actually kind of like a crowdsourcing of information, where if you know something, it's constantly updated. I mean, I check it and there's always updates, and it's free to join. You can give money to, like I signed a petition the other day to open up a cold case because Uncovered has found enough information that they feel like they can present it to the police and they'll reopen it, but the police won't reopen it right away. So there's actually a petition that I've signed to like get this case open back up, which is so exciting. The thought that there's people out there, there's thousands of people out there who I've got time, you might have time, I have time, where if I can dedicate 1 hour, if there's, say for instance, 10,000 of us, right, if we dedicate 1 hour of our day looking at a cold case, that's 10,000 hours that is not being spent on it now. Well, it is, because people are working on it. But you know what I'm saying is if enough people realize that this is a problem, and if me coming on my platform and say, I've been working on this cold case recently that I'll be presenting to you next week, if I post these videos, right, and if one person sees it and has any information and passes that information on, and I can help even in the smallest way of getting these cases solved, then I've done my part. That's what I want. I want to come here and I want to put my time and my effort in helping solve cold cases, and I want to present it here in hopes that one of you knows something. I've never lost a family member to anything like this, but I couldn't imagine. If we can help, why not? I cannot partake in regular true crime just for entertainment anymore. That's not something I want to do. It's not something I have any interest in. But this, presenting cold cases with the hope that we can help, why not? This has definitely revived my passion for being a part of the true crime community. Something that I thought was gone, honestly. But this feels productive. It feels like I'm doing good. And maybe not yet because I haven't really started, but I really hope that I can be a part of something. It feels rewarding. So with that being said, I'm done for today. I will see you all next week. Good night.